So, is Marvel vs. Capcom 2 the greatest fighting game ever created? Not versus fighting game, but the greatest fighting game ever created. Marvel vs. Capcom 2. I think it makes a strong case, man, because we're talking about just an overall well-around game from the characters, the features. Yeah, it makes a strong case. But today we're going to be reacting to Top Hat Gaming, man. Shout outs to him. And the video that he did like a while ago, basically claiming that Marvel vs. Capcom 2 is the greatest fighting game ever created. But before we get started, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, notification bell, like the video, and comment. And let's get to it.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Top Hat Gaming Man here. Every Thursday on this channel for quite some time, we have been taking a comprehensive look at the Street Fighter series. Amongst these videos, we began to analyse the history of the Capcom Vs series, and I uploaded comprehensive pieces on X-Men vs Street Fighter, Marvel Superheroes vs Street Fighter, then most recently Marvel vs Capcom. It has now been 1 month since the last time we looked at this series, but now I finally feel it is time to look at the 4th game in the Capcom Vs series, Marvel vs Capcom 2. It is perhaps the most popular entry from the franchise, and a game some even consider the greatest 2D fighter of all time. So today, we are going to look at this game and what makes it so special, but equally as importantly, answer the question of, is this really one of the best fighters ever made?
Man.
This, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of Marvel vs. Capcom 2.
Let's get to it.
Yeah. Marvel vs. Capcom 2, The New Age of Heroes, is the direct sequel to Marvel vs. Capcom Clash of the Superheroes. The game would appear in the arcades early within the year 2000.
Man, you're making me feel
over
old.
2 years after
Is that the arcade? And look at that TV. Look at that.
the previous entries in the series. This 2-year break from the series was the longest gap between releases yet, as the first 3 Capcom Vs games would only have a matter of months between each release. As a tradition with these videos, we normally take a quick look at the game's introductory scene, as it usually gives us a glimpse of what is to come. So with this in mind, let us look back at the intro for Marvel vs. Capcom 2, The New Age of Heroes.
Capcom presents.
Ready?
Marvel vs. Capcom 2. New Age of Heroes.
Y'all remember the last video when I was talking about how music is so important for video games and it controls the mood and tone of it? Just listen to what you just heard. And everybody that, obviously, when you hear, I'm gonna take you for a new ride, that comes up later on in the game, in the character selection, you remember stuff like that. It makes you want to play the game. It gets you, like, I remember when I first played it, it had me excited to even play this game. And like I was overwhelmed by of everything that came with this game. The music definitely set the tone, and music is super important. Remember when I was talking about SNK versus Capcom SVC Chaos and how I felt demotivated to play, and I felt depressed because the music was so dark, dreary, and it didn't motivate me at all to want to play the game. The game was still fun, but it wasn't like this music. Music matters as far as video game plays because it, again, like I said, it sets the tone and the mood of it. That's just me though. And a lot of people don't realize that though, man. But let's get back to it.
Now, I have to say that the introduction to the game certainly did not instill me with the same feeling of hype that all the previous entries in the series did with their intro packages. Unlike other Capcom Vs game intros, there is no footage of the fighters in action. Neither is there an announcer shouting out the name of the game or other fun phrases like "Welcome to the adventure." Instead, we are pretty much just shown a huge list of features the game includes, along with artwork of some of the characters who appear in the game. I guess the long list of new features must have been what Capcom was most proud of about this one, which would make a lot of sense considering how similar the first 3 games in the series were. There were minor mechanical differences between all the previous games, but the biggest changes between each was simply the roster of characters available. The 3 titles all offered less than 20 playable characters each, but had a different lineup depending on the game's theme.
One thing I will say about the first Marvel vs. Capcom, no. One thing I will say about Marvel vs. Capcom is I liked basically the character select because it looked like it was like a stadium. I don't know what it is about this, but it looks visually pleasing. Marvel vs. Capcom 2 did character selection, did look dope though, but this for some reason just looked eye-catching.
So for a quick run through of these, the first title mixed characters from Street Fighter and X-Men, with most of the character sprites taken from Street Fighter Alpha and X-Men Children of the Atom. Whereas the second game mixed characters from Street Fighter and the greater Marvel Universe, meaning that character sprites would once again be ripped from the Alpha series, but this time instead of Children of the Atom, many sprites would come from the Marvel Superheroes fighting game. In the third installment, Marvel vs. Capcom, sprites once again got plucked from previous games we have mentioned. However, this time, since the game incorporated the greater Capcom universe, many sprites for this installment would need to be produced from scratch. So, reflecting back on these 3 games, Capcom had milked the Street Fighter roster for this series, the Marvel universe, and had even pulled over some of their best characters from other games, such as Mega Man and Morrigan. So what could they do with Marvel vs. Capcom 2 to make the game...
Shout outs to Capcom bringing Mega Man finally in fighting games, because I don't remember Mega Man never being in a fighting game. I know he's always been like a solo, being, in solo games and stuff though, but yeah though, man, we finally got to see Zero in games and other people from Mega Man titles. But I'm so glad that Capcom finally decided to add Mega Man in fighting games, and I think he probably was a big surprise whenever this game first came out.
Stand out from the pack? Well, quite a bloody lot as it goes, as the game's introduction has already suggested to us. As one would hope, the game is yet another crossover fighting game featuring a roster of characters from various different franchises across both the Marvel and Capcom universes.
Man.
A departure from the norm that you would instantaneously notice is that the character artwork remains in glorious 2D, whereas the backgrounds and visual effects have been rendered in 3D this time around, instantly giving the game a distinct look against the title's predecessors. This in turn technically makes the game the first in the franchise to feature a 2.5D graphical style. Before we move on to talking about all the mechanical changes and modes this game received, let us talk about the bloody roster, as, in my opinion, it is one of the greatest things about this game. You start the game out with a character selection of 24, but there are another 32 to unlock. All in all, giving you a roster of a whopping 56 characters.
Woo!
A selection of characters that was so large it was almost unheard of in other fighting games.
Okay, I have to talk about this. Look, I don't think people understand how unheard of 56 characters was in a fighting game. Well, I know King of Fighters did it, but did something similar, but 56 characters in a fighting game of this magnitude, where the gameplay mechanics, the fighting mechanics was OD, where it was you had hyper combos, you had air combos, the background of the stages was 3D. You had the different modes, and to top it off, you had 56 characters. Most fighting games gave you 10 to 15 characters tops. And then, you have to unlock the rest of them, though. But yeah, man, the average fighting game back then that I remember didn't have no more than like 15 to 20 characters.
The moment in time the game saw release. The game's exciting roster would see a return of most of the characters from the previous Capcom vs games, along with characters who had not been seen in fighting games, since the likes of X-Men Children of the Atom and Marvel superheroes, such as Psylocke and Iron Man, for example. Before we move on, let us look at some additions to the roster with characters who had not been seen in fighting games, since the likes of X-Men Children of the Atom and Marvel superheroes, such as Psylocke and Iron Man, for example.
Yeah.
Before we move on...
You know what? Iron Man, it confused me in the first Marvel vs. Capcom that Iron Man wasn't there, but War Machine was there. I find that kind of odd.
let us look at some additions to the roster who have not appeared in this franchise or the Marvel fighting games previously. Firstly, on the Marvel side of things, we have 2 new playable characters. These consist of Cable, who is the son of Cyclops and Jean Grey.
Cable was a
then we
fan
have
favorite.
Marrow, a mutant whose bones grow out of her skin and can be removed from her body, providing her with potential knives and clubs, as well as body armour. On the Capcom side of things, there are even more new fighters though, so let's run through them. Firstly, we have a Mingo, who bizarrely has never even appeared in any games outside of the Capcom Vs series. There have been rumours that he is a rejected Darkstalkers character, whereas other sources point to his game being cancelled altogether. A Mingo is a round cactus humanoid wearing Mexican clothes and a sombrero, who carries a guitar with him. Ah, the good old days when cultural appropriation was still cool. Also, without a game of her own, we also have Ruby Hart, a French-speaking pirate captain who earned a prominent reputation sailing the seas. She too has no game and is rumoured to be a cancelled Darkstalkers character. However, in 2016, the Capcom website established that she is the younger sister of the main characters from the puzzle game, pirate ship Higimaru Momotaru, Bows and Beards. Once again, speaking of Darkstalkers, Morrigan makes a return to the Versus franchise, but this time is joined by Anakaris and Felicia, enhancing Darkstalkers' prominence within the Capcom Versus series. Mega Man and Roll are back too, but this time joined by characters from the Mega Man Legends series, which I guess was still sort of relevant around this game's release. So from the Mega Man universe, the new additions to the roster include Tron Bonne, an anti-hero who is a member of the Bonne family of air pirates, who would receive a Capcom game in her own right titled The Misadventures of Tron Bonne. Joining her, there is also a character known as Servbot, one of many all-purpose support robots that Tron Bonne built.
Can I say this about Servbot? To me, Servbot had to be the most pointless character on the game. I feel like they could have replaced Servbot with so many other characters. They could have replaced Servbot with Black Panther. They could have replaced Servbot with Carnage. It's so many other people they could have put on there besides Servbot. I don't know. I don't remember a lot of people using Servbot at tournaments. My friends definitely didn't use them whenever we played against each other. To me, just an overall pointless character.
The most surprising roster members added was Sun, a monkey bot from an arcade shoot-'em-up from all the way back in 1984. A really surprising inclusion in my opinion, especially considering the depth of characters Capcom would have had to choose from. Finally, in the new characters department, we have Jill Valentine, whose addition would be no surprise at all when you consider the massive success of Resident Evil during the 90s. The anime art style she is depicted in this game is also massively refreshing and different from her appearances in any games previously, all in all making her my favourite addition to the Marvel vs Capcom roster. So now we have gotten through talking about all the new characters, let's switch up to talking about the development of this huge game. As mentioned in previous videos, all the prior Versus games were programmed to run on Capcom System 2 arcade boards. Marvel vs Capcom 2, on the other hand, was developed to run on completely different hardware. In fact, this was the first ever fighting game that Capcom would develop themselves that did not utilise the abilities of Capcom arcade boards at all. Instead, the game would be developed to run on the Sega Naomi arcade board, a board that used the same electronic components as the Sega Dreamcast. The Naomi had twice as much system memory, twice as much video memory, and 4 times as much sound memory as its home console counterpart. But
let's talk about that. I wish Sega Dreamcast had a longer run than what it did, though. I wish it had the same run that PlayStation 2 had, because I feel like if it was given a chance to continue, then we probably would have another system. We'd probably have another Dreamcast, like Sega Infinity or Sega 2.0 or Sega 360 or something like that. A lot of people are saying Sega Dreamcast basically is Xbox, but I feel like the direction that Sega Dreamcast was going, like they were competing against PlayStation. I feel like they had enough though, man. And I'm so glad they put Marvel vs Capcom 2 on Sega Dreamcast, because it was the system was strong enough to handle everything that Marvel vs. Capcom 2 had to offer, from tagging out to like the graphics and the gameplay mechanics, the 3D background that was on each stage, that would, to me, that's very underrated. A lot of people don't really appreciate these days. Just the little stuff like that. Because I remember on the first Marvel vs. Capcom on the PlayStation version, you couldn't tag out. You couldn't tag out at all, but you could definitely tag out on the Dreamcast version. And the Sega Dreamcast was strong enough to handle that game. So shout outs to Sega Dreamcast. I wish it had a longer run than it did, but it is what it is. But yeah.
This was the perfect hardware to make a game on that was intended to be ported over to the powerful Sega home console. The game was first announced on December 1st, 1999, and on that same day it was revealed that the Japanese home and arcade versions would be compatible with each other via the use of the Dreamcast VMU. The feature announced would allow players to exchange data between the two versions, earning them experience points which could be used to unlock characters, stages and costumes. It was also announced that day that the game would feature online play between Dreamcast players, which was available through a network known as Match Service. Due to technical limitations of the time, this feature was removed from all international ports of the Dreamcast game. Due to the technical similarities between the Naomi and the Dreamcast, it would only be a matter of months in Japan before the arcade version of the game would reach homes in March of 2000. The game would also reach other shores around the world by the summer of that same year. Now let's finally talk about gameplay mechanics of this title. Marvel vs. Capcom 2 New Age of Heroes once again brings back tag team fighting, which is why Teddy Long loves this series over any other gaming franchise. Play modes this time around deviate though, offering the player more choice than ever before. Holla holla holla.
Holla holla.
Instead of just picking 2 fighters for yourself to face off in tag team action, instead this time around we have the option to pick 3 fighters to face off against opponents in 3-on-3 combat, instantly establishing a very practical purpose for the game's huge roster of fighters. Like in previous games, if a damaged character tags out, they can slowly regenerate health when not in play. The variable system also makes a return in this game, however this time it is even more refined. Just like in previous games, you can tag in and tag out at will, taking advantage of the characters you have selected, winning matches when you have depleted the life bar of your opponent's whole team. The variable assist mechanic, first introduced in Marvel Superheroes vs Street Fighter, is back, allowing players to call upon their off-screen teammates to join their currently selected characters to perform a single special move to aid them. Due to this, the guest character assist first found in Marvel vs Capcom has now been removed. All characters also have 3 assists each, which can vary from projectile moves to healing techniques. The Hyper Combo gauge also returns, which is gradually filled as players both deal and receive damage. Once this is full, characters can once again use this power to perform hyper combos that deal heavy damage. To add to this, using the meter, the player can also perform delayed hyper combos that execute multiple hyper combos simultaneously, and variable combinations, which allow the player to use all 3 of their characters to perform hyper combos at the same time. Other mechanical changes include something known as snapback, which forces opponents to switch between characters, and the game's actual controls have been modified too, changing from a title that features 6 different attack buttons to 4 attack buttons and 2 assist buttons. This move is said to have taken place in order to make the game more accessible to casual players. The game would obviously feature both single and multiplayer modes of play. The game's arcade mode obviously and traditionally consists of the player fighting their way through various encounters until finally reaching the game's end boss. Prior to the last boss, the player must defeat 7 teams of 3 to reach their destination. The final boss fight itself takes place against Abyss, who in typical final boss fashion has 3 different forms in which you must defeat. In this particular instance, the 3 forms also allow for the 3-on-3 playstyle of the game to persist in some way throughout the fight. Abyss is...
Although it was dope that you could fight 3v3 against the final boss, hands down, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 had the weakest boss of all fighting games ever. To me, Abyss, I feel like they didn't put energy into the final boss of this game. And it probably was because they put all the energy into the characters, the number of characters, and the detail of each fighting style for each character on this game. With 56 characters, I guess you can't really expect them to have the boss just as high powered though. But yeah, I didn't really like the boss on this game because I don't remember him. Do you guys remember him from, I guess, the comic books? Because I definitely don't. Let me know in the comics if you do remember who Abyss was. But the game was so good and the gameplay was so good though, man. But you overlooked it though, so not mad at it.
This is a character who was created specifically for this game, who happens to be a legendary creature forgotten by time and is believed to be just a fairy tale. Abyss is said to be a forbidden weapon sealed away in an underground temple where it spent untold centuries in a deep sleep. According to the game's lore, Ruby Hart was the one who accidentally awoke this character, who as a result would transport the Capcom and Marvel fighters via her airship in order to help stop this beast. Along with the game's arcade mode, the title also offers players a training mode, which allows you to practice moves and combos whilst not in direct competitive combat. On top of this, there is also a score attack mode, which is similar to arcade mode, only with a primary objective being to get as high a score as possible without the need for a continue. Another new addition to the game, which I briefly talked about when touching on the game's original announcement, is the experience system this game contains. This is present in the arcade version as an incentive to unlock hidden characters, but the Dreamcast version switches this out for what is known as the Secret Factor menu. Basically, when perusing this menu, players can browse this feature and purchase characters, costumes and stages through the use of the points they have earned throughout their playthrough. This element of the game gives the title a level of single-player replayability that is arguably a lot higher than with previous entries in the Capcom Vs series, or any of the previous Street Fighter games either for that matter. The quest for unlockables is a great incentive to keep players coming back, wondering what else the game has to offer, and a tantalising prospect for completionists who enjoy trying to attain everything within a game. To me, this is the kind of feature that should be in every game, let alone just fighters, as it is an easy incentive and a pat on the back to just keep going. But then again, most greedy developers prefer to just put additional content behind paywalls instead nowadays.
Man.
So unlockables you attain through skill or resilience are a dying gaming feature today. But
that's the one thing that changed about fighting games these days though, man. It's the DLC. Back then, you just had to it gave you a reason to play the game even more. Because you actually had to spend time on unlocking all the characters. Now you just go buy them. It'd be like $20, $30. I don't know if they're $30, but it's usually about $10 to $20 to buy characters on DLC. But back then you had to have fighter currency points to just unlock characters, which gave you a reason to play the game even more and more and more and actually use the characters that you unlock.
if you like this sort of thing, Marvel Vs Capcom 2 on the Dreamcast gives you it. So now that we have gone through a rundown of the game and its many features, let's hear what some of the journalists and critics thought of this game on release. Did they like the game as much as many people do today? Let us find out. GameSpot reviewed the game favourably, stating, "The over-the-top nature of Marvel vs Capcom 2 makes the other Versus games look subdued by comparison.
Facts.
Like its predecessor, it isn't the most balanced game in the world, but that doesn't keep it from being a great deal of fun.
That's what made games fun
Fans
back
of the
then, the
off-kilter
brokenness.
action found in the previous Versus games will surely be pleased with Marvel vs Capcom 2, as it represents the first major set of changes the series has ever seen." IGN would lump a ton of praise on the title too, stating, "Capcom sets a new watermark in the Versus series of fighters. All fighting fans must have this game. Marvel vs Capcom 2 proves to be one of the best fighting games out there, one of the Dreamcast's most sparkling gems, and an awesome experience." Other publications would just carry on piling praise onto the game, with the Daily Radar proclaiming the title to be the most fun 2D fighter game of all time, and Hot Games echoing this sentiment by stating it's the best 2D fighting game ever made.
Man.
So, from plowing through these game reviews from nearly 20 years ago, it seems that the common consensus amongst journalists was that Marvel vs. Capcom.
So, is Marvel vs. Capcom 2 the greatest fighting game ever created? Judging by what you just seen and, you know, what you've played as far as fighting games. For everything that it offers, man, in my opinion, I say it is. I feel like Marvel vs. Capcom 2 is the greatest fighting game ever created. And I'm going to start off with the pros of Marvel vs. Capcom 2. The pros, 56 characters to choose from after you unlocked all the characters. That was unheard of back then, outside of King of Fighters. But yeah, but that was unheard of back then because most fighting games you had maybe 10 to 15 characters tops. But 56, and it was a tag team, it was a 3v3 fighting game. And another pro of this game was the fighting system, the gameplay. Like, man, from air combos to super combos with the hyper dodge, with the tag assist. Man, it's like this game right here was almost perfect as far as the fighting style. Now, it did have broken stuff in it though, but that's what made fighting games great back then, was the broken stuff. And you know, people exploit the brokenness of the game though, but the game to me was goated just for that reason alone, of just having a perfect combo fighting system like that though, man. And another thing, I'll say another pro also was the game modes. You had arcade modes, training, you had score attack. I'm not sure if you had a survival mode, but yeah, you had the gift shop, basically where you use fighter currency that you earn from playing the game to unlock characters, characters, costumes, and stages. Yeah though, man, like they gave us reason to play this game over and over and over, and this game had a lot of replay value. Another pro again was they featured characters that we're not used to seeing in fighting games. Like Mega Man probably surprised a whole bunch of people, because for a long time, we didn't see Mega Man in fighting games. We seen him in his solo games, but we didn't see him in fighting games. And then that opened the door for other, like, you know, characters from the Mega Man franchise to be in the games like Zero and company. So, but let's talk about the cons of Marvel vs. Capcom. And there's not that many of them. I feel like they had a few pointless characters in this game, like the Lego guy. I already forgot the Lego person already, but the Lego character had to be the most pointless character on Marvel vs. Capcom 2. Not even close. Let's see, another con was the boss, the main boss, Abyss. That had to be the weakest boss that I've ever played against in Marvel vs. Capcom 2. And it wasn't even iconic. You got so many iconic bosses in fighting games, whether it be M. Bison, whether it be Shao Kahn on Mortal Kombat, whether it be Apocalypse on, was it on Marvel vs. Not Marvel vs. Capcom, was it on X-Men vs. Street Fighter or Marvel Superhero vs. Street Fighter? Yeah, like you had iconic bosses like that. And then Marvel vs. Capcom 2, you had Abyss. The only reason why I feel like that they gave us that weak boss, which they probably didn't think it was weak, but I think it was weak. Only reason why they gave us that, I think that they gave us that weak boss, is because they spent so much time and effort into the 56 other characters that we had. It had to have a balance. So you couldn't get everything you wanted though, because the overall gameplay was so good and the characters were so good that the boss, they lacked on the boss. So I kind of give them leeway on that. You know, I'll give them a pass for that though, but the boss was super weak. It was mid. But is there any other cons of Marvel vs. Capcom 2? Because there's a whole lot more pros though, but I don't want to be talking your ear off for a long time. Oh, no, wait, one more con. The last con I'm going to say is they didn't have a real storyline when you're playing the story mode, arcade mode. Whenever you beat the game, that's it. You beat the game, you get your points, and then you go unlock characters or you purchase whatever you want from the store. On other fighting games like Tekken, Mortal Kombat, they actually gave you like an ending screen, like an ending credit, an ending story about what's going on or whatever, what's going on with them, what happened afterwards and stuff. And even on some certain fighting games, they showed beforehand or whatever what their story was and through the game. Marvel vs. Capcom didn't really have that. The gameplay, I guess, was so good that you just fight, beat the boss, get the points, and unlock characters. But other than that though, I can't really think of any more cons for Marvel vs. Capcom 2. But like I said though, man, is Marvel vs. Capcom 2 the greatest fighting game ever created? It's debatable, and I think it builds a strong case for being that though. It's definitely a GOAT, one of the GOATs of the fighting games. But I want to hear your views. I want to hear your opinions, your views on about Marvel vs. Capcom 2, and is it the greatest fighting game ever created? Let me know how you feel in the comments. But you already know what to do, man. It's Architect Mr. J with another video. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, notification bell, like, comment, share. Until next time, peace.